How's everybody doing? So I'm excited to be part of what I think will be a very interesting and educational panel here. We have representatives of some of the most active and successful mobile product companies out there and platform companies. So without further ado, I'd like to start by introducing the panelists and have each of the panelists introduce their companies briefly and how it relates to the theme of this panel, building an effective global mobile strategy. So Peter?
Hi, I'm Peter Hamilton. I'm the CEO of Tune. We're enterprise SaaS for mobile marketing. So as app development companies or companies that have a new mobile strategy are trying to expand into both emerging markets and just markets that are foreign to their own, we help those customers connect to regional partners, regional ad networks and publishers, and people that are going to specifically be able to provide a lot of help to them in growing their footprint in those spaces. Our revenue in particular is divided up very globally. About 40% of it is the United States, 30% is in APAC, and 25% in EMEA, with the rest going to Russia and Latin America as emerging markets.
Okay, Kent?
Hi, my name is Kent Wakeford. I'm Chief Operating Officer of Kabam. Kabam is an entertainment company that builds and publishes mobile games. We're one of the leaders in developing free-to-play core mobile games in the Western markets. We have offices in 6 countries, over 850 employees, some of the top games on iOS and Google that are played on a global basis.
Okay, thank you. Jeff?
Hello, everyone. I'm Liu Cheng from Huawei. So I'm sorry that Jeff has some emergency interview, so I replace him here. Huawei is a global communication infrastructure providers, and also we are in recent years we have input a lot of the effort on the mobile devices, especially the smartphones. In 2014, our shipment for the smartphone can oversee 80 million units this year, and the increase of the shipment exceed 30% every year. So next year we estimate our shipment for the smartphone can oversee 100 million units. Secondly, we are based on our device and hardware. We have our own apps and software ecosystem. So this time, we wish that we can build global channels, both for Chinese developers to go to the overseas market, and also for the overseas developers to go into the Chinese market. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Dippak?
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I am Dippak Khurana. I am CEO, co-founder at Vserv. Vserv is the #1 mobile ads marketplace for India and Southeast Asia. The company is about 4.5 years old. What's unique about us is that we profiled over 200 million mobile internet users across India and Southeast Asia, where we've leveraged our first-party data, and we combined that with the telecom data. So we kind of sync up our data with the data from the telecom carriers. That helps us create very rich, powerful insights about users, which in turn helps any advertiser or any app developer leverage that, be it for user acquisitions or be it for monetization.
Great. Thank you, Deepak. So maybe I'll start some of the questions that we had discussed prior to getting together today. One of the questions that I consistently hear from mobile app developers out there that I meet is, ultimately, everybody wants to be globally successful. They want to have their app proliferate globally, have hundreds of millions of users. But the key question is, where do you start? Do you start the product development with the concept of creating a global product? Or do you focus on the local market that you're in, that you're most familiar with? And so maybe I'll start by maybe asking Kent, who's in that development publishing business, about how Kabam thinks about the global versus local question.
Jay, that's a great question. And my response is, think global, act local. For us in the mobile gaming space, the opportunity for a global hit game is real, and the opportunity is very large. A hit game today could be a billion-dollar franchise, as we've seen with games like Clash of Clans. So you need to think and build for a global market. But the execution needs to be local. You need to be able to optimize your content, optimize the experience for the specific regions that you're going into. And we could talk a little bit about that in a while in one of your follow-up questions. But as you think about kind of moving into markets, whether it's North America, Europe, some of the Asian countries that we talked about before, Russia, others, you need to be able to culturalize your product for those markets. And then you have to kind of tune and operate your marketing specific for those markets and those regions, which reasons why a number of us are on this panel, because it's really working with companies that have a global footprint where you could tap into large consumer bases throughout the world.
Right. So that makes sense. I mean, I guess to add on to that, there's the element of developing for the global market, but specifying for the local market. And obviously, the marketing activities in this day and age with across multiple platforms and app stores, and it's quite an expensive proposition. Peter, maybe you can address the question of how can a developer or publisher effectively do that with the right set of data and analytics that perhaps Tune can provide and support?
Sure. First, I want to say I liked Kent's vocabulary in terms of tune your marketing. I thought that was beautiful. But,
pretty scripted, I'm sure.
Yeah, exactly. We actually have never met before, but we've worked with Kabam for a long time with their marketing teams, even back in 2011 and 2012 when Kingdoms of Camelot was the top grossing app in the iTunes store in 2012. Congratulations. And a lot of that effort was really successful because they also marketed across many, many, many different networks and partners and publishers out there in the world. They were one of the first to really start to mix that up from a really, really broad level. And so that was, that was an early case study for us, but also a case study for many app developers out there that are trying to expand into other markets. There's a couple of things I would say about how to approach your strategy to expand into markets that are not your own. One is in the launch strategy. You really need to think about, where are my competitors today in these different markets? What markets are the lowest hanging fruit for me now? What can I have a lot of gain in very quickly? There are various tools that help you figure this out. App Annie has done a really good job providing a competitive analysis tool by region. It shows where some of the big app developers out there are spending across different ad networks and partners, and that has helped a lot of people. Also, you want to examine the App Store with something like Mobile Dev HQ. You want to see where are you ranking in the app stores in these various markets. And that all is still kind of emerging, but you need to get your hands on as much pre-launch data as you can to figure out, okay, where do I really want to target? And that's not to mention this product side of things that Ken was talking about, and making it localized, making it make sense, making sure that this is actually going to be a viable product for the region. And then on the other side, I would say, you need to start looking at really expanding your reach into those publishing partners and thinking about who has the stronghold in Russia, who has the stronghold in China, who are the exciting new networks. If I'm moving into India, you should certainly be looking at Vserv, right? You should be figuring out how are they going to connect me to the customers there, and you should be talking to them about your product strategy even, because they understand that emerging market.
Okay, well that's a good segue. Maybe I'll ask Dippak specifically, since you do focus on some of the emerging markets, especially around India and Southeast Asia, how would you consider this issue of trying to expand into those regions that obviously have differing characteristics from a consumer behavior and purchasing power perspective?
Sure. Ken just mentioned a point about, think global, act local. I think it's really, really very hard to act local. It's kind of like a lot of people can easily think about going global, but when it comes to executing globally, very few of them have been able to do that successfully. So that's, Now, if you take that perspective, we came out of India, and day one, we had the ambition to go global. Having said that, in our ecosystem, no one believed that a company coming out of India could really successfully execute a global strategy. So we had huge challenge in terms of looking outside the ecosystem. So what we did really was we clearly carved out the world saying that, hey, you know what, consumers in India are very similar. You know, we can map similar consumers in other emerging markets. So we can look at Southeast Asia, we can look at a couple of countries in Middle East Africa, and we can look at a couple of countries in Latin America. So we say, hey, we need to cut the world into two parts. There's the developed economy and there is the emerging economy. So that's really how we did the first separation in the first couple of years. Going down there, then even in terms of acting locally or executing locally, we didn't go out into all countries, you know, on day one. We sequentially picked up geographies, which we thought made sense, because as we were building that, we were making a few mistakes, and obviously all of that costs you time and resources. So you want to kind of make the right amount of mistakes as you keep scaling up the business. So that's really been our thought process. We looked at clearly saying, hey, we are coming out of India. We get a large captive audience here to build our foundation. We sharpen our product. We kind of sharpen our execution skills and then kind of replicate that into other markets and take a step-by-step approach as we scale up the global business.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks, Deepak.
I can confirm they've done an incredible job at that. They just came out with 19 out of over 600 different ad networks and partners on a global basis, right? So we can see that they're emerging into all of those markets. And
It's the mutual admiration club here.
So I think that's thanks to the consumer base in those markets, you know. So the consumer base is rising in those markets, and it's not just for us. I think for any app publisher, you know, you're going to find emerging markets kind of contributing, you know, being in the top 5 when it comes to users or acquisitions. Yeah.
So Liu Cheng, you can certainly address the big quagmire that is the China market. So US publishers, app developers in general, not only game developers, on the mobile side have been trying to crack the China nut, which is obviously a huge market opportunity. Yes. What can non-Chinese developers, publishers, how can they effectively try to penetrate the Chinese market and get access to the very lucrative China market?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Chinese market is especially a very unique market. Like Fusheng just now mentioned, in China, there are so fiercely competitions. So, so for example, in US, the App Store and the Google Play, so all of the people paid to download. But in China, almost the apps download and play, it's for free. And also, in China, the model is a try and buy mode. So I think for the overseas developers, first they should change the models, the business model first. So all of the apps and the games model is totally different for Chinese market. Secondly, in China there are some the channel distribution channel is very differently from US. So there are almost 300 app store in China, right? But in US only 2 maybe. Right? So the marketing team or the distribution team should be very familiar with Chinese localized channel. Here I just mentioned for Huawei also because based on hardware, so we are right now the number 4 distribution channels in Chinese market. So that's the second difference for the app developers. The third one, I think it should be the consumer communication or also consumer insight. It's totally different. The behavior of Chinese market is very different from US. For example, for the game, so many people pay for game. It's not only by they try and buy, also they pay by some in-apps, purchase some tools, some honors. So it's all of the system is totally different. So here we also suggest for the game developers, especially to come into Chinese market, should be localized and also work with some localized partners there.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So that makes a lot of sense. So I guess the next question, after you've developed the product with the think global, act local in mind, and again, I'll start with you, Kent. I'm really looking forward to the new Marvel game that's coming out, so that's exciting. But let's talk specifically about the launch. You've put in a lot of resources of development, and you have a game that you want to launch globally. How do you go about thinking how you launch this? Do you launch like some of the other app companies in specific local markets to test it out, see how it goes, and then you expand from there? How do you decide which markets, and how do you go about actually launching and marketing your new app or game?
Great question.
And share a little bit of trade secrets. I know you guys are successful. Let's share the wealth with the community here.
All right. So in the spirit of sharing the wealth, I'll use Marvel Contest of Champions as an example. So Marvel Contest of Champions is a game that we're launching in 2 weeks. We've been developing it for about 14 months. The game is beautiful, will be tons of fun. We believe it will get millions of consumers on a global basis. And the development team has spent a lot of time making sure that they have the right product for a global market. So now we have to think about launching the game. And the approach to launching a potential global hit game is starting at multiple different levels. So first is, even before the game is launching, there is the beta period, which you talked about. And we launched the game in 3 different markets. We launched it in Sweden, Denmark, and Canada.
You've already done that.
It's been in beta.
Oh, okay.
Tremendous reception. But it's very interesting, and
Canada gets everything.
and Canada does get everything. But we learned something from working closely with Marvel, is that their films and their products don't typically do well in Sweden and Denmark.
Oh.
But they do very well in Canada. So what we saw from the monetization and retention was a distinct difference in those 2 markets.
So how did you select those markets in the first place? I think that'll be really insightful if you can share a little bit of that.
Well, it was in discussion with Apple, targeting markets that spoke English, where we could launch smaller markets and where we could test and test UA.
Got it. Okay.
But the point that I was making about the distinct difference, it is really understanding the markets and the market tastes. So in this instance, the product, vastly different results in 2 different markets because of the product and the IP.
Was it the same exact product without any localization at this point?
Exactly.
Okay, got it.
So now we know, and we've mapped out all of the markets that Marvel does well, that we know historically have done well for us, and so we're going to now gear up for launch. So we create a lot of top-of-the-funnel awareness as we build up, so we're using traditional channels and YouTube and PR and social media channels to build awareness for the game. And then we go into launch. And we will put marketing capital behind the launch. Now this is where working with partners, like everyone here, becomes critical. It's understanding the UA, understanding the efficacy of marketing budgets on a geo basis, overlapping it with what we believe will be the key markets for the game, and then tuning our, once again, see I use tune? Tuning our marketing budget based on those data inputs. So we do really think about it, and we go deep in terms of the data and the analysis of what are those markets that we believe the game will be most performant in, where will the marketing have the best efficacy in terms of spend, and then executing.
So that's, Kent, thank you for sharing that. That's a perfect cue to the next question to Peter. So we just talked about tuning based upon the data.
All right, it's going to get old.
Into the right markets and figuring out what the appropriate marketing budget, et cetera. But tell us specifically, what is the data set that you'll look at, and how do you get from the data set to the recommendations when you work with customers on the publishing side?
That's a great question. I think one of the advantages to launching in all of these different markets separately, it's something that it gives marketers something that they love, and that's all these different groups to test on before they're totally, global. Right. It's really important to really spend time in all of these, because you'll find these, these cultural differences, you'll find performance differences. Some of the things have to do with your game, and some of them have to do with the culture, and you need to suss out all of these things before you go broad, before you go really big. I mean, really, you're looking at some of the basic, metrics, like Kent mentioned. You're looking at revenue per install that you're able to get. You're looking at lifetime value. You're looking at retention. How long do those users that have downloaded your app keep coming back to your app over time? I mean, with those three metrics, and then of course you want to be considering like what are the costs to acquire each of those users? How expensive are the user acquisition channels in these different regions, and how does that back out to the revenue that you're able to build? These are all factors that you have to think about. Of course, it's really different if you're not a gaming company, right? Like, let's say you're a big brand and you're trying to develop a mobile strategy now, and it was a little bit different when you would just sort of launch your website, and everyone could now access your website from most points in the world, and you could localize it for different languages, and then you would, promote products regionally from different publishers. Apps actually give these advertisers the opportunity to really, really dive into the data and go, from a targeted approach and launch similarly to the way a game does. Right. They can literally take little regions and see how people react to things in different ways and different products, and start to expand over time, and not necessarily have to just go, hello world, here is this thing, all at once. Right. And they can study actually very similar metrics that the gaming companies are doing, which is really cool. I mean, so about 2 years ago, 80% of our customers were gaming companies. And that's because they were early to the party. They knew, they knew these metrics. They knew what was important. They knew how to find the type of user that's going to come back to their game and spend a lot of money in their games over the long haul. Now we're about 50% gaming, and that's not because gaming's not growing, because it is in a dramatic way. But brands and retail and e-commerce, travel and entertainment beyond games are coming in with a full force. Right. And they are doing an incredible job approaching these markets in the way that will actually drive revenue for their companies. And that's, I think, the bottom line is like, how can we back this out? Can I make $1? And if I can make $1, I can make $2. And let's focus on that and being profitable.
Okay, great. Very helpful. So when I ask the same question to Dippak, and I'll ask you, Chung, as well, I'd like you to also address a couple of additional elements because of the markets that you cover and the characteristics of the markets. One is related to timing. So after, let's say, this Marvel game is launched, and let's say it's launched in some of the primary markets, when you talk about emerging markets, there must be a timing element, I would imagine. And then secondly, there's also going to be a localization element. So as you work with your clients that are multinational developers and publishers out there, what would you recommend would be the appropriate timing to consider expanding into some of these emerging markets, as well as what process of localization should they take?
Okay, that's a pretty good question, thanks. So when you look at, just to kind of break up emerging markets, and the theme of the conference is the next 5 billion, mobile internet users, let's take into account, like already we've seen adoption in US, we've seen significant adoption in China. The next big market is really India when it comes to the opportunity. Now, when it comes to the timing, already we're seeing India as a market which ranks number 3 on Google Play when it comes to downloads. So all leading app developers potentially, get significant amount of downloads, or would get significant amount of downloads from that market. So that's the positive, that's good news. On the other side, the bad news is that right now, India sucks on monetization. So people don't understand, what is the problem in India when it comes to the monetization part. So just understanding the ecosystem, when I talk to various partners globally, I find most of them are not really aware of finer nuances of what the consumer is in that market. A case in point being that India only has 8% credit card users. So how are these guys, and you're talking about, just 8%, but mobile internet users, 20% of the country is having mobile internet today. So that's level of penetration there. So problem there is a store like a Google Play App Store, which is very popular, in order to fuel the app economy, what's yet to be solved is an integration with operators so that carrier billing can be leveraged for in-app purchases. Because people are used to buying digital goods there, which is deducted from their prepaid or their phone bills. That's the largest wallet which is available there. So I believe that an app store like Google, they've enabled carrier billing in some emerging markets. There are about 24 countries where they've already enabled that. They're going to soon tackle that problem in India. And once they're able to once that problem is really solved, that market is waiting to get lapped up by most app developers. So that's to just give the context of the importance and the timing. So I believe that problem should get solved in the next 6 months to 9 months, as we go along.
And how do some publishers think, how should they think about localization? Is there any particular, like let's take this Marvel game that's coming out from Kabam, targeting the Indian market, targeting the Southeast Asian market. What should they be thinking about in terms of localization? How should they actually go about trying to localize?
I think, some of these brands, some of these franchises are fairly global, So when you talk about adoption in India for a Marvel title, you're going to get good adoption there. Mm-hmm. I think when it comes to localization, what they need to look at is what kind of localization can they bring in how they charge users. Okay, so that's critical. Right. So the thought process is you don't need to really go out and change user experience there, but you need to tweak the way you're going to charge users. So you need to keep in context the fact that, okay, the users in India, what kind of ARPUs they generate, as a user, what kind of phone bills do they get, pay up. So they average spend about $4 to $5 in a month. Now, if you're going to say that this user is spending only $4 to $5 on the phone, what percentage of that would he really allocate for virtual goods? You're not going to find most of them spend another $4 or $5.
Right.
Okay. So microtransactions, is very key there because at best, if you want to generate more transactions, you should keep in mind that each consumer is not going to spend more than $1 or $2 at best in a month. So you need to find ways where you say, hey, this virtual item, I'm going to give it to this user at 10 cents or 20 cents in that market. But what I would do is that I put in a time element there. So I say, okay, you can get this virtual item for the next 1 week. And I charge you just 10 cents or 20 cents for it. So that's a tweaking which most companies will have to do in the way they charge users.
So that's interesting, not just in terms of localizing the content itself, but building the packaging in terms of the
pricing
systems.
Yeah. So just getting the pricing right, which is relevant to the consumer's wallet, I think that's the area where people need to localize.
And similarly, on the marketing side in India in particular, conversion rates are very different from the different channels that you're buying from when you're trying to acquire users. We see sometimes it's more like 1,000 to 1 conversion rate rather than 100 to 1. And that's, some of that has to do with the types of inventory that people are buying on, and some of that inventory is incentivized or not,
Correct.
et cetera, right? But you have to really think about, like, how am I going to buy?
Correct.
And who are the right partners to get me to real downloads with real users that are really valuable, right? Correct. And so you need to work closely with partners to figure that out.
Correct. Okay. No, that's a good point.
Sorry, but I want to make sure that we hear a little bit about the China market, obviously. Lucho, maybe you can also address the timing and the localization aspect.
Yes. So for Chinese market, I think right now it's very mature. This year in China, the mobile game can reach almost
several billion.
Several billion, yeah, US dollars there. So no, it's 10 billion,
right?
15 billion renminbi. Renminbi is there. So all of the ecosystems, including the billing and also the carrier billing, credit card, all of these things are very mature.
That's a good point. Like carrier billing is big in China.
Yes, also. It takes almost 30% of half of the total market share. So I think that's the good things for the developers in overseas market. But another important thing for developers to come into China is the things like channels, 300 I have mentioned just now. Also, another thing is the monetization system. So it's totally different. I think even with India, with US, it's totally different. The systems. How can they to make Chinese customers to consume there? So it takes a lot of the efforts. Yeah.
Right. So I know we're running out of time, but before we wrap up, I'd love to get just words of wisdom very quickly, some lessons learned from launching these global products or assisting publishers and devs launch global products. 30 seconds each. Peter.
Make sure you're measuring so that you know what's working and what's not.
Okay. Kent?
I would say invest the time up front to understand the markets that you're going into.
Okay, that's solid advice.
We hope to build a bridge for overseas market developers and domestic developers to have a win-win global partnership.
Okay, and Dippak?
Identify regional partners. Don't just look at one global partner. You know.
All right, that was a strong finish. So if the audience could thank me for the panelists for sharing their insights to us. Thank you very much.